Olivia Parker had always seemed like the perfect choice. At 24 years old, she had experience, a warm smile, and a quiet, reassuring presence that made parents trust her almost instantly. The Wilsons, a young couple balancing their demanding jobs with parenthood, needed someone reliable to care for their 17-month-old son, Noah. They had searched for weeks, filtering through countless applications before settling on Olivia. Her references were spotless, her demeanor was gentle, and she had even taken early childhood education classes in college. She was everything they had hoped for in a caregiver. From the moment Olivia started, things seemed to fall into place, effortlessly. She followed the Wilsons' instructions carefully, sticking to Noah's nap schedule, feeding him on time, and engaging him in play. She sent regular updates throughout the day, short texts, pictures of Noah giggling in his high chair, videos of him playing with his favorite stuffed animal. It was exactly the reassurance the Wilsons needed. They were confident they had found someone who genuinely cared for their child. As the weeks went by, Olivia became more than just a babysitter. She was a trusted part of their lives. They started to rely on her for longer hours, sometimes asking her to stay late when work ran over. She never hesitated. In fact, she often insisted that they take their time, saying she loved spending time with Noah. Her dedication seemed unwavering. Friends and family even commented on how lucky they were to have found someone so dependable. What the Wilsons didn't know was that Olivia had perfected the art of deception. Behind the pleasant smile and the caring updates, there was a darkness they couldn't see. She had learned exactly what parents wanted to hear, how to earn their trust, and most importantly, how to keep them from ever suspecting that something sinister might be happening. Olivia had worked as a babysitter before, and each time she had been able to convince parents of her reliability. No one had ever suspected anything unusual, though there had been minor incidents in the past, children who seemed unusually afraid of her, unexplained bruises that were always brushed off as accidents, and parents who felt something was off, but could never quite prove it. Noah was too young to speak, too young to tell anyone what was happening when his parents weren't home. He was at the mercy of the person meant to protect him. There were early signs, subtle, almost unnoticeable at first. Noah, once an energetic and curious child, became more withdrawn. He started crying more frequently, especially when his parents were about to leave for work. His appetite changed, and he became unusually restless at night. The Wilsons chalked it up to teething, a phase all babies went through. Then there were the small bruises, nothing alarming at first. Olivia always had an explanation. A minor fall while learning to walk, bumping into furniture, the usual tumbles of a growing toddler. And since the bruises weren't severe, the Wilsons didn't question it further. After all, Olivia had been so attentive, so careful. There was no reason to suspect that the person they trusted most could be the one causing harm. Neighbors had started noticing little things, the kind of details that seemed insignificant at first, but, in hindsight, carried a much darker meaning. The Wilsons lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood where people paid attention to each other's routines. It wasn't uncommon for neighbors to hear the occasional cry of a fussy toddler, but something about the way Noah cried felt different. It wasn't the typical whimper of a child wanting attention. It was prolonged, desperate, and at times, almost panicked. A few neighbors mentioned it in passing, but no one ever thought to intervene. After all, Olivia was the trusted babysitter, and everyone assumed she knew what she was doing. One afternoon, A delivery worker approached the Wilsons' doorstep with a package. As he waited for someone to answer, he heard loud banging from inside the house. It was followed by a sharp, sudden cry from Noah. Then silence. A moment later, Olivia opened the door, smiling as if nothing had happened. The worker handed over the package and left, brushing off the uneasiness creeping up his spine. He told himself it wasn't his place to question what went on behind closed doors. At home, the Wilsons began noticing changes in Noah's behavior. He was no longer the same joyful, giggling child they had known. He flinched at sudden movements, shrank away when Olivia reached for him, and cried uncontrollably when his parents left for work. His sleep became restless, filled with whimpers and occasional night terrors. The Wilsons assumed it was a phase, perhaps separation anxiety, common for children his age. When they expressed their concerns to Olivia, she always had a reasonable explanation. "He's just been a little fussy today," she would say with a smile. "Probably teething. He tripped over his toy earlier, but he's fine now. I think he's just adjusting to a new schedule." Her words were always reassuring, her tone confident enough to make them believe that everything was normal. But everything was not normal. Noah's bruises became more frequent. A dark spot on his tiny arm one week, a faint mark on his leg the next. Olivia dismissed them as minor accidents, and since toddlers were prone to bumps and scrapes, the Wilsons accepted her explanations. The idea that Olivia, the woman they had trusted so completely, could be responsible never crossed their minds. But the warning signs continued. One evening, while giving Noah a bath, his mother noticed small red marks on his back. Her heart clenched with worry. She asked Olivia about them the next day, but Olivia remained calm. "I think he leaned too hard against the crib railing," she said. "I'll keep an eye on him." Her response was so casual, so natural, that any lingering doubts vanished. The Wilsons didn't know it yet, but they had placed their child in the hands of someone far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. It was a call no parent ever wanted to receive. The Wilsons had been out for only a few hours when Olivia's number flashed across their phone screens. Her voice was shaky, her words rushed. She told them something was wrong with Noah. He wasn't responding, and she didn't know what had happened. Panic surged through them as they raced home, their minds filled with fear and confusion. Just that morning, Noah had been smiling, reaching up for hugs, his tiny hands clutching his mother's fingers. Now he was unresponsive? It didn't make sense. When they arrived, the scene in their living room was pure chaos. Paramedics hovered over Noah's tiny body, their hands moving quickly as they performed CPR. His skin was pale, his lips slightly blue. His lifeless form looked so small on the large stretcher. Olivia stood to the side, crying, repeating over and over that she didn't know what had happened. He stopped breathing, she kept saying. I turned away for a second, and when I looked back, he wasn't moving. The Wilsons could barely process what was happening. The paramedics rushed Noah to the hospital, and they followed closely behind, gripping each other's hands so tightly their knuckles turned white. Every second felt like an eternity. At the hospital, doctors worked frantically to revive him, but it was too late. Noah was gone. Just like that, their baby was gone. His mother collapsed to the floor in anguish, while his father stood frozen, his mind refusing to accept reality. It was impossible. He had been fine that morning. How could this happen? As grief swallowed them whole, a doctor approached with a somber expression. His words sent a new wave of horror crashing over them. "There are signs of trauma," he said carefully. "Bruising, internal injuries. This doesn't appear to be a natural death." The room spun. The Wilsons could barely comprehend what they were hearing. Trauma, injuries. Had Noah fallen? Had something happened while they were gone? 100 questions raced through their minds, but one thing was clear. This was no accident. Detectives arrived soon after, their presence turning the tragedy into something even more terrifying. They needed to ask questions, examine Noah's body further. Olivia's story didn't add up. A simple accident wouldn't explain the extent of his injuries. They pressed her for details, but her responses were inconsistent, her emotions flipping between hysterics and eerie calmness. As the night stretched on, dread settled over the Wilsons like a suffocating blanket. They had left their son in Olivia's care, trusted her, relied on her. Now, he was gone. The doctors, words replayed in their minds over and over. This doesn't appear to be a natural death. Something terrible had happened to Noah. And deep down, they knew Olivia wasn't telling the whole truth. The investigation into Noah's death moved quickly. The initial autopsy report confirmed what the doctors had suspected. This was no accident. Noah had suffered extensive internal injuries, including fractured ribs and signs of repeated blunt force trauma. There were older bruises in various stages of healing, suggesting a pattern of abuse rather than a single unfortunate incident. The findings were horrifying. Detectives questioned Olivia again, pressing her on the details of what had happened that night. Her story wavered. First, she claimed Noah had simply stopped breathing. Then, she suggested he might have fallen from the couch. When confronted with the extent of his injuries, she hesitated before finally saying she didn't know how it happened. It was clear she was hiding something. A deeper dive into Olivia's past uncovered troubling patterns. She had worked as a babysitter for multiple families over the past few years, and in 2 previous cases, parents had noticed strange bruises on their children. One mother had even fired Olivia after her toddler began having unexplained night terrors and recoiling from being touched. But without concrete proof of wrongdoing, no one had reported her to the authorities. She had simply moved on to the next job, her record clean. Detectives obtained a warrant to search Olivia's phone and laptop. What they found was chilling. Her search history included disturbing queries. How to discipline a toddler without leaving. Marks, how to make a baby stop crying fast and even toddler bruises. When to worry. The most damning piece of evidence was a deleted search that forensic analysts recovered. How to explain internal bleeding in a baby. Surveillance footage from inside the Wilsons' home should have provided answers, but Olivia had thought ahead. The home's security cameras had been disabled during her babysitting hours. She had claimed it was due to a faulty internet connection, but detectives now realized it had been intentional. She hadn't wanted anyone to see what really happened. A key breakthrough came when a neighbor came forward. She reported hearing loud thuds and prolonged crying from the Wilsons' home on multiple occasions. She had assumed Olivia was simply struggling to calm a fussy toddler. But looking back, she realized something far more sinister had been happening. Another neighbor mentioned seeing Olivia roughly yank Noah by the arm one day while bringing him inside. At the time, it hadn't seemed alarming enough to intervene. Now they both regretted not speaking up sooner. As the evidence stacked up, detectives pieced together a horrifying truth. Olivia had been abusing Noah for months, inflicting pain in ways that wouldn't immediately raise suspicion. The bruises, The fear in his eyes, the sudden changes in his behavior. It had all been warning signs. And on the night he died, she had gone too far. Perhaps he had cried too much, or perhaps she had simply lost control. Either way, the tiny body of a 17-month-old boy bore the weight of unspeakable cruelty. With overwhelming evidence against her, Livye was arrested. But for Noah's parents, the nightmare was far from over. Their son was gone, and no punishment would ever bring him back. The trial of Olivia Parker drew national attention. A young, seemingly responsible babysitter standing accused of the unthinkable, torturing and killing a defenseless toddler. Public outrage grew as more details emerged. The prosecution painted a clear picture of months of abuse leading up to Noah's tragic death. They presented medical reports, forensic findings, and expert testimonies that left no doubt this was not an accident. This was murder. Noah had suffered at Olivye's hands in ways no one could fully comprehend. The evidence was undeniable. Fractured ribs, internal bleeding, bruises in various stages of healing. A forensic expert explained how his injuries indicated repeated physical trauma rather than a single fall. The autopsy confirmed that on the night of his death, Noah had endured severe blunt force trauma to his abdomen, causing fatal internal bleeding. The prosecution revealed Olivye's chilling internet search history, exposing her dark thoughts and premeditated actions. She had searched for ways to harm a child without leaving visible marks and how to cover up signs of abuse. She had even looked up legal defenses for accidental child injuries, indicating that she had been preparing for the possibility of getting caught. Her defense team attempted to argue that she was overwhelmed, that she had never intended to hurt Noah, that perhaps she had simply made a tragic mistake. They claimed she had struggled with undiagnosed mental health issues, suggesting she had acted out of stress rather than malice. But their argument fell apart in the face of overwhelming evidence. Noah's parents sat through the proceedings in silent agony, listening to the horrific details of their child's final moments. They had trusted Livye. They had left their son in her care, never once suspecting the monster that lurked beneath her kind exterior. The guilt consumed them, even though they knew they had no way of seeing the truth before it was too late. The jury went to deliberate. There was little doubt about what their verdict would be. It took only a few hours before they returned to the courtroom, delivering the words that Noah's parents had been waiting to hear. Guilty on all charges. The judge sentenced Olivia Parker to life in prison without the possibility of parole. There would be no second chances, no opportunity for her to harm another child. But for the Wilsons, the verdict did little to ease their pain. Their home felt emptier than ever, the silence a constant reminder of what they had lost. Noah's room remained untouched, his toys still scattered as if he might return at any moment. But he never would. In the months that followed, Noah's case became a nationwide call for stricter babysitter background checks and harsher penalties for child abusers. His parents became vocal advocates for child safety, speaking out about the warning signs they had missed and the devastating consequences of misplaced trust. But no amount of awareness, no number of legal reforms, could undo what had happened. The Wilsons would spend the rest of their lives haunted by the memory of their son, stolen from them by someone they had once believed was family.